Carolina Hurricanes have a handful of days before July, which means they have a handful of days to take care of their free agents as much as they can before they're able to test the waters, before they're able to talk with other teams. And yes, that includes Jake Guentzel. And I have to admit, they're pulling me back in. I thought he was goner. I thought there was no chance. I thought he was out. I thought it was like, oh, they really did rental him from the trade deadline to the end of the season, and now they're just going to let him walk.
They're reeling you back in. They want you to believe again that there's still
They want me to believe. There were reports that they were fielding trade offers or considering trade offers to send his rights somewhere else so another team could negotiate with the 8th year for Jake Guentzel. Meanwhile, Pierre LeBrun, covers the league nationally, tweeted this out. Carolina hasn't given up on trying to sign Jake Guentzel. Talks ongoing. This is from LeBrun. My sense is it's going to be hard for him not to see what's out there Monday, but Kane's still trying. All right, reeling me in a little bit, right? I'm on the line. According to Frank Saravalli of the Daily Faceoff, the Canes have offered 8 years, which is the max the Canes are allowed to offer. 7 years would be the max anyone else is allowed to offer. According to Frank Saravalli of the Daily Faceoff, the Canes have offered 8 years at slightly less than $8 million. He believes it's actually 8 times 775. Zzz, that's the fish taking line, right? If I were on the line, that offer makes me believe it's less likely because that offer I don't believe is near market value for Jake Guentzel. I think he's a $9+ million per year player on the open market, 9.5 even. I think that's what Jake Guentzel is. So 8 years, 775. 8 years, $7.75 million per. Again, this is not our money we're talking about. This is professional goal scorer NHL money we're talking about. I throw in only before that, right? If it were any of us, I'd be like, holy cow, $7.75 million a year. For Jake Guentzel, I go, that's only $7.75 million per year. That's not a number you accept because of the number. That means the Canes are going full emotion. They're going full sales pitch, right? And we've all been in that situation. I'll even tell a personal story on this one. That is a financial offer. 8 years, $7.75 million. That better come with a letter. Here's what I mean by that. When my wife and I were looking to buy our first house, right, trying to be a first-time home buyer. This was a couple years back. Looking to buy our first house. There was a house that we liked, right? There was a house that we wanted that was just a little bit above our budget, right? Because that's anyone that's ever looked for a house. The difference between like the budget you've set for yourself and like 10% more is the difference between like a okay, fine and Disney World. Like there's like
it's one or the other.
There's like full water parks in the backyards of these houses that are 10% above your budget. And you're just going like, how? It's within my budget, we can get a 3-bedroom. 10% more, we can get 12 bedrooms and a guest house. How does this make sense? So anyway, there's a house we really wanted. It was a little bit more than our budget. Not 10%, but a little bit more. And we put in an offer that was below asking price. And you know what else we did? We sent in a letter. You know what that letter said? Because we had heard from the real estate agent that the couple selling had like raised their family there and their kids, and now their kids were grown and had kids of their own, and they were moving into I think they're moving to Florida. Right, they were like kind of doing the retirement thing. So we wrote a letter about how we wanted to raise our family in that house, and we could envision our future kids in the backyard, and we want like that fireplace when it's cold outside, and on and on and on. Because we were making the emotional appeal, knowing that they would not say yes based on the number. Right, we were lowballing them. We didn't have as much. So we tried to appeal to maybe they had the money going, right? Maybe they were set for life and they just wanted to do a solid for a young couple. To me, that's kind of what the Canes are doing here. They're like, listen, Jake, 8 years, $7.75 million. Now, I know that's not the most you can get per year or really anywhere close to it if you hit the open market. But please read this letter. And the letter is going to say, you're going to be playing alongside on the same line as one of the most unselfish superstars in the league. Sebastian Aho is just as comfortable with 3 assists as he is 3 goals, and you can be the recipient of that production. And he's not seen as a Bedard-level talent or a Sidney Crosby-level talent or a McDavid-level talent, even though he's underrated. So if you wanted to be more of a premier face of the franchise guy, Carolina can do that. Right? You started the beginning part of your career playing along Sidney Crosby, and I'm sure it was kind of annoying to always see the cameras pointed at the guy right next to you.
Or you finally have the chance to elevate Sebastian Aho's game, sort of like Sidney Crosby. You can make the argument elevated Jake Guentzel's game when he was playing in Pittsburgh.
You want to appeal to all of that. You win a cup in Pittsburgh, you're another guy that won a cup in Pittsburgh. You contributed to Sidney Crosby's cup. You win a cup in Carolina, haven't won one since 2006. They've been hitting their head against this glass wall for the last 6 years in the postseason. You win a cup here, they're putting jerseys in rafters.
Right.
Like that's, to me, 8 years, $7.75 million. It's not an insulting number, right? It's not like, oh, we'll give you 6 per just to say we made you an offer and you're going to slam the phone down and walk away. It's close enough that you're like, and read this, and they'll read the letter. But you're going to have to make the value up elsewhere. Because if you're asking him to give up, 1.7 per year, and I know it'd come with the extra year, so there's a little bit of like, well, you get the total value back, and you probably won't get a huge contract when you're 38 at the end of it. I get that. But if you're asking him to turn down like a lot of money per year to return to the Canes, you better show that value in another way. Hey, our defensive system is so great, you can win when you only score 2 goals, right? Rather than being on a team that has to score 4. You can grow. We already have it. And maybe they're, again, we don't know this, but maybe behind the scenes, they're like, we have already agreed to a number with Seth Jarvis. So we're going to have you, Jarvis, Svech, Aho locked up for the next 6+ years. That guarantees you a couple runs at this thing. To me, the reason I'm still on the hook for Jake Guentzel coming back is not because that Frank Zaravalli is telling me that 8 years, $7.75 million is the offer. It's the fact that he even knows an offer was made. Because that tells me the Canes are still in the conversations, and that means they still have time to make their persuasive arguments.
I want to revisit what you just said earlier in this conversation about how when you win a Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, you're just another person that won the Stanley Cup with the Pittsburgh Penguins, because you're absolutely right. But let's say it all goes well for Carolina next year. The dominoes fall into place. And I'm not going to use any example because we don't know what's going to happen during free agency. But if the Hurricanes win the Stanley Cup next year, you're a part of the story, and that story is what was the turning point to get the Carolina Hurricanes to their first Stanley Cup championship since 2006. And Jake Guentzel could be the centerpiece of that story when he was brought into Carolina last year in acquisitions.
Like what was different? What was different? Well, Jake Guentzel was around for the full season. That was a big part of it. And then it's like, oh, look at that. Kristaps Porzingis, but better, right, for the Celtics. Like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown might have been there, but they didn't win the whole darn thing until Drew Holiday showed up. Like you can be that guy and actually better than each of those because I believe he's a better player than they are NBA players. Maybe Drew Holiday. He's a $100 million player in his last 30s. But the way I think of most transactions in professional sports are whoever gets the best player usually wins. And you're seeing more and more teams understand it. You're willing to trade away more picks. You're willing to trade away more players if you're bringing back the crown jewel in the trade. I know this isn't a trade, but if it's like, well, we can let Guentzel leave and bring in 3 other players on cheaper contracts, I'm going, yeah, but then you let Jake Guentzel leave. That's the equivalent of trading that player for the 3 that you use that money to spend on, and I want the better player. So now that I'm back on the line, don't leave me hanging, Canes. Make it happen.